Hello again guys, welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Today's video is going to be a discussion of the runes. So we're going to start with the first aett, and then in the second video we'll do the second aett, and then in the third and final video we'll discuss the third aett of the runes of the Elder Futhark script. Now, before we discuss the individual runes, as I say, first of all, this is my own personal interpretation, so feel free to comment on what your interpretation of the runes are, because this goes beyond the simple definitions of the runes. I will give the simple definitions of the runes as we discuss the runes. Normally at the very beginning I'll tell you what they represent traditionally and what metaphorically that is then translated into, but then I will give you my own personal interpretation of what the runes represent on maybe the grander scale of things where possible, but also on their process of your self-learning. The Elder Futhark script is really, when placed in order, a simple map, a simple path or journey really that you must take to learn from any and all life experiences, and to take that learning and develop it into understanding and integrate it into yourself so that you develop higher states of learning and develop oneness with yourself. Over time, through experiencing more and more of life, more of life experiences, integrating your experiences into yourself through the learning process, you can develop ultimately oneness, and we see that in the third aett. The third aett is very heavily focused on the higher learning centers of the individual and how they develop once they get to a sort of critical stage. You know, you will continue to stay within the first two aetts during the mass majority of your life, if you ever get out of them at all. But the first two aetts kind of fuel the third aett. The first two aetts are really concerned with both the creative and destructive processes of life, and about how you can learn but through both gains and losses, or you know, the good parts of life and the hardships of life. And really they represent the learning cycles that you must go through to achieve a step-by-step. It's like a step pyramid. Your learning centers grow as you begin to interpret and integrate all these sort of mass life experiences over time, and there will reach, as I say, a certain point when you get to a certain height where your mind is opened up so much that really that high consciousness is not like how it is in most of us, how it is in myself at the moment, for example, like a subconsciousness that you're simply unaware of, just sort of ticking away, receiving information from the spiritual realms and allowing you then to integrate it and gain that knowledge through your subconscious, and then eventually a realization of that knowledge within yourself. But when you get to a certain point, you start to actually become aware of your higher learning centers. Maybe not 100%, but you become much more aware, much more tuned to it, and as a result, it's like a sort of critical mass. You know, a bit like in like nuclear explosions, you know, like when nuclear meltdowns happen and stuff, they'll reach a point when there's just no turning back. Your mind just continues to explosively expand, because it's got enough understanding now to develop itself, even without life experiences as such. It starts to work things out for itself. It starts to receive information from the spiritual realms at an nth degree, so to speak, at such a rapid rate that it becomes fully incorporated within you. And as I say, you can ultimately, if you pass through it long enough, gain oneness. Now, the achievement of oneness, of course, is not just to be achieved in your life, but also after death. Also, in death, obviously, you ascend into the spiritual realms. You go to a random heaven or hell, if you wish to call it. But whilst you're experiencing the afterlife, your spirit is simply yourself. Okay, essentially what the second aett represents. It's yourself, it's your persona, it's your personality, it's your individuality, and as a result, it's still capable of learning, and so you can learn in the afterlife as well as within your material life. And so really achieving oneness is not just a process that you do in a lifetime, but it's what you do for the lifetime of whatever's left of the universe, ultimately until Ragnarok itself. And so this really is an ongoing process that you really need to embrace fully, to achieve that oneness, which, as I said in a previous video, is really synonymous with greatness. It's oneness it would be the ultimate goal of any pagan, and if achieved, really you're becoming fully integrated with all aspects of the universe, all aspects of reality, the gods, mortals, spirits, and everything in between. You are becoming fully integrated with it and have a full and complete understanding of everything that is happening. And that is why it's important to learn the runes. As I say, this is my own personal interpretation, so if you disagree, or you have your own interpretations that you wish to share, then please do so in the comments. As I said before, with different perspectives, we can, by adding all our different perspectives together, we can get a 360-degree view of what we're talking about, and we can develop each other's knowledge and understanding of what is in front of us, because this is hard stuff to do. There are no right or wrong answers as such. There are just answers, and what might be right to you or me may be wrong to someone else, but it doesn't matter. They're all simply perspectives, and as long as there's value to your perspective, then it has value and should be considered, whether it's considered right or wrong in many respects. Okay, so we're going to progress into the runes now. Okay, so the first rune to discuss is Fehu. Okay, so if you've watched my previous videos, you'll understand, and if not, I'll give a brief summary anyway, that at the very birth of the reality, and at the rebirth of reality, so because reality goes through a cycle of life and then death, and then a rebirth back into life, and then death again, and continuously is recycled. Okay, at the point between death and life, or death and birth of reality, ultimately, at the point of rebirth, the universe at this point has achieved, at this point, the greatest amount of oneness that it's capable of achieving, as it goes through every single reality cycle, or macro cycle, or recreational cycle, so you want to describe it as, from creation to destruction to then rebirth. As it goes through every cycle, it learns a little bit more about itself. The universe is capable of integrating information of itself through fulfilling fate, and as it goes through, it learns more and more and more. And so every time we go through a cycle, the universe just understands that a little bit more about itself. It gets closer to infinity, regards its level of oneness. But whatever stage we are now, at the very beginning of our own reality, there was a certain level of oneness. Now, I've described what oneness is in a previous video. It's simply an aggregation, essentially, of probabilities that have been fulfilled, realized, understood and integrated, and they are bound together with a combination of knowledge and understanding. Essentially, they are bound together by wisdom, and this process of combining probabilities that have been fulfilled by the flow of fate through wisdom create a level of oneness which goes wherever, and as I say, it accumulates fully at the end of the death of the universe, when there is no more probabilities to fulfill, and the oneness that the universe has gained is a single entity at the very beginning, and this entity of oneness has a huge potential because it is filled not only with actualized sort of, you know, attenuated sort of probabilities. Not only is it filled with probabilities that have been achieved, but there is also essentially a level of probabilities that have not been achieved, that are maybe not contained within the oneness, but can be released from the oneness and then achieved and integrated into the oneness. And so what happens at the beginning of the universe, the oneness that we have, the universe doesn't like to stay still, and the reason behind that is because of fate. Fate has this incredible desire. It has this desire to seek out to fulfill fate, an incredible desire to seek out and fulfill probabilities, and thus itself fate, and integrate those completed events, those completed actions back into the universe to regain oneness. So it's funny, fate destroys oneness. It causes it to fragment through almost like a prism. If you can imagine all this oneness being put through a prism and then splitting and splaying out into, you know, an infinite amount, a full spectrum, if you wish, of probabilities and possibilities which are still yet to be achieved, then this is what happens. Basically, is what fate does to oneness. It causes it to fragment and to spread out, and then fate goes along and tries to achieve these probabilities, as I say, to integrate them, to increase the level of oneness that is within the universe, or within our reality. So as I say, the universe is the material realm, but the reality is the material realm plus the 8 spiritual realms. Now, this desire, this seeking out process to fulfill possibilities and probabilities is described through the rune of Fehu. Okay, now bear in mind the Elder Futhark script was originally, before it had written sort of symbols, was simply language. It was simply a range of syllables that may have been able to be combined to form words and meanings such as that, but may have just had individual syllables and sounds that really made no sense. But the sounds that this represents, and all the other runes represent, are the sounds of the universe, the sounds of the creation and destructive processes of the universe, and the sounds that are made through the learning processes when the universe achieves a greater degree of oneness. They're simply vibrations. How to understand that on a simpler level is, imagine, like in science, for example, we understand that the universe began, the Midgard began, with a huge explosion called the Big Bang. And that explosion, all explosions make noise, right? It makes a huge amount of noise, and we can pick up that noise. In fact, if you were to turn on an old television, you know, the ones that go, you know, have that static on them, that is actually the microwave radiation, or the sound, if you wish, of the Big Bang still echoing in the void of space. So we know that there was sound, a huge amount of sound at the beginning of the universe scientifically, and so this fits in perfectly with the belief of paganism that there are essentially these sounds that originated at the beginning of the universe, but then have been continued, just like the microwave radiation of the Big Bang, have been continued throughout reality and are being used to actually maintain the universe, to maintain the creative aspects of the universe, to maintain the destructive aspects of the universe, and maintain then the higher degrees of the universe, essentially what would be considered the spiritual realms. And so these runes are very important, because the sounds which we give them, the names that we give them, Fehu for example, is the natural sound, or the vibration essentially, that was that represents the original sort of when fate seeks out and or desires to fulfill potential possibilities. This is the sound essentially that it would make, or the vibration it would make, Fehu. Okay, that's ultimately what is believed to be the case, and an easy way to remember what Feihu looks like. I mean, really, you can turn it upside down. Well, not turn it on its side like this, and it kind of looks like a cow, which is what it represents. And it represents domestic cattle. Its original meaning was domestic cattle, which was the barter system back in, the times when the futhark script was developed, and domestic cattle, as a result, represented the barter system. And thus the amount of wealth, the maximum wealth, or the potential wealth that you could develop in a lifetime. And that's where Feihu comes from, the maximum potential of achievement. Okay, this is what Feihu represents, the maximum potential of achievement within a universe level. At the very beginning of the universe, it was the maximum level of potential achievement that could be achieved by fate, and that would be an infinite amount ultimately, if fate had an infinite amount of time to go along. But on an individual level, really, you can look at Feihu as being the potential of any situation that lies ahead of you, but is not yet realized. So if you think of fate ahead of you in the future, there are several strands of fate that you can go along. Which strand of fate you go along could be down to you, could be down to an intelligent process, as I described in the previous video, or it could be simply that you simply pass along the path with least resistance. As I said, the manner in which you travel along the strands of fate, personally, I don't have the answer. I only have speculations. I have more questions than answers. But nonetheless, there are several strands of interwoven sort of strands of fate that are ahead of you in your life. And when you are at the moment, you have all these potential situations that you can still fulfill, that you have a potential to fulfill. Because you yourself are an actual fulfillment. You are an actual probability that has been fulfilled. You are an action, a completed possibility, but you are a special kind of possibility. You are a possibility that has not only been realized, but can realize other possibilities. You can go out and achieve other possibilities and probabilities within the universe and contribute to the gathering of oneness within the universe, and you are self-aware of it. It's not like an inanimate object contributing towards it. It's not going to gain any higher learning, but because we have awareness, and because we have a higher state of learning, a higher consciousness as well, linked to the gods, linked to the spiritual realms, we are actually capable of developing our awareness to such a high degree that we can actually become, as I say, one with reality. We can gain oneness ourselves, as the universe itself can also gain oneness. So it's a special place to be, being self-aware, sentient, having a personality. It gives us a great opportunity to pursue, as I say, oneness. And we are capable of doing that because we are capable of learning, and not only learning, but understanding what that learning means, and we can integrate it within ourselves. Now, Feihu, as I say, is just really represents the seeking out process that fate goes through to fulfill potential possibilities, to fulfill things that would then be described as fate once they have been fulfilled. But really, when you look at the first aett really, when you look at each of the individual runes, represent an aspect of your learning process that is highly related to your subconscious. So when we look at the learning process, whenever we learn from a spiritual element. I'm not talking about learning science and stuff like this. Obviously, that just is most often or not, through the self, through the personality, through the persona that you are. Okay, but when we learn from a spiritual side, the learning comes first of all from our higher centers of learning, our higher consciousness. then it gets transferred to our base consciousness or our subconsciousness, our willpower, that most people would describe it as. And then once it has been integrated within our subconsciousness, it is then translated and essentially brought forth into our self, our actual consciousness. And that's when we become aware of it. It's when we realize the knowledge that we have received and gained. Okay, and if you look at that, then we can look at how the runes not only sort of describe the the flow of fate and all the rest of it, but we can actually look at how what Fehu represents. As I say, it represents desire. Okay, fate has a desire to fulfill and seek out possibilities and probabilities, and if you wish to learn, the very first thing you must have is the desire to learn, the desire to fulfill probabilities, have life events, experience them, learn from them, understand them, and then eventually integrate them into your learning, into yourself, into your persona, and then use that to raise your higher consciousness to higher levels of learning. And this is a good way to look at the runes because, as I say, it then turns the runes into a map, into a guide of self-learning, how to develop yourself as an individual and how to progress towards oneness. But you cannot achieve oneness without understanding the path that you must take, the steps that you must take. And the first step that you must take is desire. You must have, with every life event, the desire to go out and do stuff, to experience the world, to experience life, and experience whatever is out there waiting for us. Okay? Now, the second rune is a ruse. You've heard me mention this before. Okay, a ruse originally represented wild, non-domesticated cattle called, it was a certain breed called the auroch, and as you can see, it kind of looks like either that these are the sort of the front and hind legs of the cow, and or it's actually more the shoulders, the kind of almost the shoulders of the cow, if you wish, the big broad shoulders. Okay, that's one way of looking at it and remembering and being able to recognize the symbol of a ruse at a distance, because of course one thing about the runes is not only knowing their meaning, but be able to recognize the symbols that have been attached to these sounds and vibrations. As I say, originally they're just sounds and vibrations, but we've created what many would describe as sacred geometrical shapes that are associated with those sounds, and those shapes can be focused on. And the shape itself, originally, without the belief in the sound, without the belief in paganism, and without the connection that one can develop with the sounds and with what the sounds represent, this shape means nothing. It won't achieve anything for you. But if you have that connection, okay, if you have that connection with the gods or the spiritual realm and the higher centers of learning and all the rest of it, then these symbols can actually be focused upon and have power within themselves, the power of the sound or the vibration. So when you incantate these runes, and go like, for example, Fehu, ruse, so on and so forth, essentially you're practicing Gauda magic, and you can use this, for example, to embolden you. So I often use a ruse combined with furizas to aid me in my weightlifting in the gym. Strength, and as we see, furizas is the sort of the ability to get through any barrier or obstacle that might be in your way, but we'll get into that later. But you can incantate these words, and it becomes almost like a mantra, you're just repeating, and it gives you a focus. But if in your mind's eye you can focus on the symbol, then there's a greater power almost as well. And if you are in a position where you can't speak because you've got a big heavy weight on your back, for example in my case, then simply just focusing on the symbols can be enough to inspire what these runes can do for you. Okay, now as I say, the metaphorical representation of a ruse is strength, endurance, courage. Okay, represents all of these different aspects, but what it truly represents is the raw energy of the universe, the driving power, the strength essentially required to allow fate to fulfill its desires, to fulfill its seeking out processes. It is the raw energy that fate uses to go out and fulfill the fates, or the probabilities and the possibilities that it wishes to fulfill. And obviously at the very beginning of the universe, the raw energy that we're talking about at this point is very unrefined, and that's why this is often described as being a very primal energy, power to create worlds and things like this. But simply what it does is it allows fate to flow. Okay, this is the raw energy that allows fate to flow through Yggdrasil ultimately, and as a result causes the flow of time and the flow, or the sort of definition of the defining of life and the sort of creative destructive cycle. So a ruse is a very powerful rune when you consider that it's driving all the three cycles of paganism ultimately. And an off thought, this is just a thought that I had recently actually, and I'll be wondering what you believe or think of it, but a ruse being the raw energy of the universe, and being the fact that as it flows, or as it sort of indirectly goes into essentially the cycle of life, it causes the cycle of creation and destruction, and it helps to define life. And as pagans, of course, as I say, we see life as magic. There's no difference between magic and life. When we tap into magic or pagan magic, all we're doing is tapping into a life force, or an energy, so to speak, the web of weird as it's often described. I propose to yourself, perhaps that web of weird is the raw power of a ruse, or maybe a refined power of a ruse at least anyway, that has been sort of filtered through, as I say, through forcing fate through Yggdrasil. It then creates a byproduct of a ruse at least anyway. And without a ruse we would not have magic and thus life in this world. We know that we wouldn't have life, and as a result we wouldn't have magic, but it's a ruse that maybe we're tapping into when we use magic. An interesting thought. I think it's a thought or theory that needs refining. It's not fully fleshed out, but it's something to at least think about. Okay, and on an individual level, what a ruse can represent is, you start off with the desire to want to do something, to have a life experience, to create an event, to fulfill a possibility, to learn. Okay, as a result, well, a ruse represents the determination that you will require to be able to achieve this possibility, this probability, to be able to fulfill it to its fullest sense. It's a determination of the mind and the strength of the body and the mind combined, to be able to do this. And so it's, I would say it represents determination, another aspect of our subconscious. It's a part of our personality, yes, but could we feel determined, make ourselves actively feel determined? It comes from beneath us almost, as I say, it comes from our subconsciousness. And yes, we can have this feeling, I've felt it myself, we've all felt it, where you feel determined to achieve no matter what and all the rest of it. And this determination, this grit, ultimately though, is not coming from yourself, it is coming from your subconsciousness, and is being interpreted by yourself as a certain feeling, the feeling that we get when we think we feel determination. Okay, but it's a translated form of determination. Okay, so the next rune to discuss is Furizas. Okay, Furizas that's the old translation of this rune. It can be often described as the rune of thorns. Okay, traditionally it can either represent thorns, hence why it's called the Rune of Thorns, but it can also represent two other things, two very opposite things, believe it or not. It can represent Thor's hammer, and you can probably hear that in the sound. Thor is ass. Sounds like Thor, you know, Thor, right? But it can also represent giants, the Jotun. Okay. Now, I'm uncertain exactly why traditionally it could represent, you know, all three of these things, because they're kind of almost seem unrelated. Sorry guys, just got a little distracted there. I had to check that text message. So, as I say, they all seem slightly unrelated. Thor's hammer, which is Mjolnir. There you go. The Jotun, i.e. the giants and thorns, they all seem slightly unrelated. But then once you get into what the rune means on an almost like cosmological level again, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. And Thor's hammer, really, that makes more sense when you, well, of course it was a very powerful artifact which could just basically go through everything, so it does make sense. But it also makes more sense when it comes to using the rune. There can be a backlash when using this rune through incantate, through Gauda magic, for example, or through, well, yeah, just Gauda magic basically. But that's another video where I talk about the runes on an individual level and how they can be used within magic ultimately. But what this represents, this particular rune, the Rune of Furizas, is the will of the universe, essentially, to take the raw energy of a ruse, that raw driving power, that significant power that we described earlier, and will it out to seek out the potential fulfillments of Fehu. Okay, so it's a willpower. Now, it's a willpower that combines both the strength and desire that comes before it. And that willpower is strong enough to bypass any barriers, any resistance that may come up against it. It is there to help to take the power of a ruse and to drive it through anything that may otherwise interrupt that strength, that raw energy, the flow of energy. It simply, like the thorn, cuts through all resistance. And really, as a result, you know, having a strong will really comes from courage, doesn't it? If we look at it at an individual level, willpower is it's different, but it is really an element of courage. To be brave, you need a willpower to overcome whatever fears may present themselves in front of you. You know, you may go ahead and then all of a sudden have something in front of you that terrifies the shit out of you, but if you have the willpower, you can overcome fear. Okay, and so you know, courage and confidence also, you know, the ability to, you know, just get on with things with a certain level of confidence, all comes from really, originally, the source of courage and confidence comes from Furizas, it comes from willpower. And so on an individual learning scale, you know, you must have again that original desire of Fehu to go seek out and have life events. You must have the strength and determination to actually go out and achieve them. You must have the energy to be able to go do it. And then you must have the willpower to see it through no matter what, because sometimes life throws shit at you, right? Sometimes things can be achieved easily, but sometimes success comes with a lot of failure also. It comes with a lot of attempts, it comes with a lot of hardship, and it's the willpower that will see you through all that shit to eventually achieve your long-term goals, and ultimately as a result experience a hell of a lot of learning. Hardship is very good for learning, so we say. It's not good for your happiness, but it's very good for your learning, and I can attest to that. Okay, and so simply put, that's what futhars is. Right, let me find the next rune. Okay, the next rune is Ansuz. So it's very similar in look to Feihu, and that might be a bit of an issue for some of you. Okay, but the Feihu, basically the lines that come out of this single line here go upwards, and here they go downwards. Okay, I can't really think of any other way really to make it easier for you to learn, but I suppose it's just, well, learn it. I suppose you could say, well, if you had another line here, you would have an A, and so it's Ansuz. Yeah, that's probably a good way of looking at it, just to try and make the symbol a bit more recognizable for you. Now, Ansuz traditionally means speech or communication, and through an extension of that, it actually can mean Odin specifically, actually. Okay, because as we know, Odin is very wise and has a great power over Gauda and over his speech and the way that he portrays his words. He has incredible speechcraft, in fact, and so really the speech or communication can then later metaphorically mean Odin himself. But what does it mean on a larger scale? Well, if we break communication down, okay, communication is simply a way or form of you being able to convey an intention. When you speak, you can communicate what you want. You can say, I want food, I'm hungry, or I'm thirsty, give me a drink. You can convey intention. And thought is the first action of intention. And so really what Ansuz truly represents is intention, ultimately. Okay, speech, as I say, can metaphorically and very literally give an intention or mean an intention, and how this fits into the runes at a larger scale is that by giving intention to the prior energies that we described, the desire, the strength, the willpower, by giving all these intention, we give them direction. And we give them direction to fulfill a potential possibility, a fate. But we give them direction to fulfill an actual specific fate. And this is where we know, as a result, in the previous video I was talking about, well, fate might be random and all the rest of it, but really I truly believe that there is perhaps an intelligent aspect behind the universe that allows fate to be directed, and Ansuz is this direction, this intelligent process of giving fate an intention and thus a direction to follow to make sure that the correct fate is fulfilled and not just some random fate. Okay, now what does this really mean on an individual level? Well, it really just basically means the same thing. It means intention. Your sort of the direction that you go in. Basically, as you go forwards with the previous things described, you will have a plan in mind, whether you know it or not. You will tackle whatever barriers may present themselves, yes, with futhars, but you will already have a plan on how to use futhars, or how to use a ruse to drive yourself forwards to fulfill a possibility. And it's that intention of Ansuz, as I say, that is found within you. There is intention behind your action. You have intelligently decided, you have thought of what, as I said before, thought is the first action of intention. And so really on an individual level, it's intention, but it's intention with thought. It's a directed intention. As I say, it really applies to the cosmic level as well. There's no real distinction between the two. It's one of the few runes that applies equally on an individual level as it does on a cosmic scale also. Now the next rune to consider is Reizu. Okay, often pronounced Rado, but it's actually pronounced traditionally Reizu. Okay. Now Reizu is the beginning of fulfilling a possibility, or the beginning of fulfillment, but with, as I say, correct direction, which comes from Unsu's. It's the action, and is often described purely as action. It is the action of fulfillment. So Rado is once you sort of get to where you want to do, once you find the probability, or that you want, or the life event that you want to experience, you start fulfilling that experience. You start experiencing it. You start involving yourself in it, engulfing yourself in it. And in regards to the universe, as I say, the probability begins to be fulfilled. Now, it's not an instantaneous process, just like going through life, having an experience within life. Sometimes some experiences can last years, some mere minutes, if that, but it doesn't matter how long it takes. This represents the beginning of the process of fulfillment. It represents action. Okay? Within the universe, as I say, at a cosmological level, especially. So essentially, it's the transformation of intention into action, but the correct action, as I say, because that action has direction. Okay. Now, traditionally, this means wagon or movement. Okay, and so you can see how quite easily wagon or movement can be seen as action, as a fulfillment. Okay, it doesn't take really much of a sort of, I don't need to explain that one to you guys. It doesn't take much stretch of the imagination to see how that translates into action, essentially. Now, on an individual level, at the subconscious level, what could we give another word to action, or action with direction, at least anyway? What could we call that? We call that purpose. And so Rado represents your inner purpose. With everything else, you have a purpose that you wish to fulfill, and with that you will fulfill, or at least start to fulfill, any action that or any event that you participate within. The next rune that we will be considering is the Rune of Gayness. Let's just make sure that you can see that properly. Gayness. Okay? Traditionally, this means torch or fire, and can sometimes mean ulcer. And a lot of people will actually, for some reason, focus on the ulcer element of what it means, seeing it as being representative of illness or sickness or pain of some kind. But they're wrong when they do that, because torch and fire really gives you an idea what this means. It's, and especially as it follows Reizu, it really, you can see where Gayness is perhaps going. We've begun to fulfill an action, but Gayness, just like an ulcer which swells, or torch that grows, or fire that grows as it's fed more fuel and emits light, and essentially fills the room that it is in with light. Just like fire can or torch, to say, can fill an area with light, or an ulcer can swell and become bigger and bigger, or deeper in this case. Actually, they tend to go downwards, don't they? you can see that actually Gayness represents simply a swelling of Reizu. Reizu getting bigger and bigger. It fuels Reizu, okay? It fuels Reizu and allows it to continue until an action is fully completed. Reizu just simply represents the beginning of fulfillment of an action, but it doesn't represent the fulfillment of the action, the complete fulfillment of an action, only the partial fulfillment of an action, the start of fulfillment of action. Gayness combined with Reizu shows then the full completion and fulfillment of any particular possibility or probability. And really, Gayness is the process, as I say, that feeds Reizu, and it surrounds it in another intelligent process, because it will surround Reizu until the action is fulfilled completely and correctly, and it won't stop swelling it. It won't stop filling it until it's done. And so another way of putting it is that Gayness is perhaps more of a sort of, very much a stronger definition, as I say, like you'd find it in a dictionary or something, is the intelligent process that embodies the action of Reizu itself. Like a growing fire, the action will be completed and grows to complete fulfillment of the intention of Unsu's and the will of Phoisas, and it completes the full potential of Fehu in doing so. Okay, and that's really what Gayness represents. Now, what would it represent within our subconscious at an individual level? Well, when you start something, what allows you to complete it? What allows you to finish what you're doing? Perseverance. And so this really represents perseverance within oneself, regards the process of learning, to persevere no matter what until something is complete, because you can only learn something, you can only or understand something completely if you have fully involved yourself within it. If you have a partial involvement, you'll only have a partial understanding. You must involve yourself in whatever you're doing to the complete, to the fullness of its, as I say, until you're swollen with knowledge. And then you can begin to understand that knowledge and integrate it into yourself and raise your higher learning centers. Right, the next one is often described as the merger. Traditionally, it's described as a gift or partnership, and I like the word partnership because it really sort of then lends itself to the merger much easier. And when you see the rune, you'll understand that it's a merger. It's two lines joining together. Okay, we call that an X these days, or cross, but that is a merger. It's a merger of two fates ultimately, because that's what's happening when you are completing or fulfilling an action. You yourself are a fate, as I described in a previous video. You are a possibility that has been made a reality and achieved. You are a possibility that has been fulfilled, and as you live, you have Fehu. You have potential to fulfill probabilities and probabilities. Your special kind of life. You have a life that can go out and gain oneness, as I said. And as you get older, as I say, that level of Fehu, that potential, goes down. You may still seek out and desire to fulfill possibilities and probabilities, but the potential of Fehu, the value of Fehu that you have, it will become less and less as you get older, until of course you go into the spirit realm, in which case of course I suppose your Fehu goes sky high, because the spirit realm, you're going to live for quite a long time, or exist within it for quite a long time. But what Gabo represents, sometimes pronounced Gibo or Gifu, but Gabo is the correct pronunciation, is the merger that happens when Gayness fills up the potential of Fehu, ultimately, using all the energy of the runes in between to fulfill the probability and the correct probability with direction, as I say. And it embodies this potential of Fehu, essentially, and all the things in between together. It merges all the energies that we've described. Okay, so Fehu, Aruz, Forizas, Reizu, Ansuz, which comes before Reizu, and of course Gayness. It links all them together and forms a cooperation of energies ultimately, because of course having all of these individual qualities within your subconscious or within the universe is all great and fair do and all that. It's like having a building site with, you know, a bricky, a carpenter, you know, a sparky, you know, a hod carrier and all the rest of it, but not having a foreman to direct them. Okay, you have all these energies, you have all these purposes and action, and you know, and the swelling of the action, and so on and so forth, fulfillment, perseverance, and all the rest of it. You have desire, you have strength, you have willpower, but unless you can use them all together in cooperation as a merger or a partnership, okay, there's no real point, because you won't succeed. And so Gabo is the rune that connects all of the other previous runes. Okay, it's just 6 of them, so it combines the previous 6 runes, and essentially it's the merger of probability to actuation. Okay, so it takes what is originally a probability or a potential within Fehu, and it merges all those energies between Fehu and itself together to form an actuation, i.e. an action, an event. It leads to a fulfillment of potential. And so really this represents the universe creating simply through itself, creating oneness through experiencing itself. Gabu is the hardest one really to define on the subconscious. It's something that I found very hard to give a word to. It's something that we can all understand, but how do we experience that within ourselves at an emotional level? Emotions are really part of our subconscious. We have no real control over them. We feel them when we feel them, and you know, desire, determination, willpower, intention, purpose, perseverance. They may, you know, you may describe them as emotions or qualities of personality or whatever. But they all really are part of our subconsciousness. We have no real control over all of that. We have some, to some degree, but no real control. It's either there or it's not. But Gabo really is just simply realization. You know, when you just suddenly realize something, you have an epiphany. And that state of realization, it's an actual feeling, isn't it? If you've ever experienced it, you'll understand. It's a feeling, the feeling of realization. And when you achieve something, you can feel success, yes? And it's the realization, success, feeling successful is simply realizing achievement. And that's what Gabo really is. Gabo is really just the sense and the feeling of realizing achievement. It's the feeling of being successful, of fulfilling a possibility. And from here we can then go on and start integrate, we gain knowledge from this experience, but then we can start taking that knowledge, turning it into understanding, and integrating it into ourselves. But just before that, we have one last rune before we get to well, we actually are now going to get to the end of the first aett, which is where we'll end our video, and then we'll move into the second cycle, which is of course the destructive side of things, because really, as I say, this is a path, a life journey essentially, but all things that are created must come to an end, and really the runes, the first two aett, represent the cycle of life, creation and destruction. Ultimately, it's only the third aett that really takes a step away from that and really represents, as I say, really the spiritual side of things. Okay, oops, one of my lights has just fallen off the table. Right, anyway, we move on to the last, the eighth and final rune, okay, which is Wunyo. So let you have a look at that, or Wonyo, actually. I just had to check the pronunciation there. Wonyo, okay. Spelt Wunjo, so you might hear it like that, or you might hear it pronounced Win or Wen, because they're different. Things are dropping. There are different, obviously, words that exist within the Lesser futhark script and the Anglo-Saxon script, but Wonyo is the way that we pronounce it in the Elder futhark. Now, this rune, traditionally, it represents joy, contentment, satisfaction, and there really is no further meaning to this, because when you look at it, it truly is. That's what it is. It's joy. And like I said before, like, joy is, or happiness or whatever, is, but it's joy more than happiness. It goes beyond happiness. Happiness comes from material things, really, but joy is another level. It can enrapture you, it can fulfill you in its own way. So joy is a very powerful feeling, very, very powerful emotion. And basically the completion of all that comes before it, and the merger of all those energies that have allowed the completion of a potential sort of or potentiality, as I say, or possibility. And the seeing of that probability turned into an actuation, okay, so turned into an event, turned into an action, a completed and fulfilled action with direction, gives a true sense of fulfillment, a true sense of joy. And this is what Wonyo represents. And the reason it represents joy is, as you start fulfilling probabilities, or as the universe goes along filling multiple probabilities, simultaneously, obviously, because it's on a much faster scale than a singular person. As you fulfill potentialities, probabilities throughout infinity, ultimately, you gain a little bit of knowledge of oneself. So we're already beginning to gain not oneness, but knowledge of oneself. And this is the first major step into gaining oneness. If you don't understand yourself, how can you understand that which is around you and the interactions between those two elements? That is what oneness is, ultimately, as I say. It's the joining of two probabilities, yourself and another probability, or two other probabilities, as I say, on a universe scale, but on a self level, it's looking at you combining, really fully integrating the knowledge and understanding of an event to you, integrating it using wisdom to, as I say, integrate an action into you.
which was originally, as I say, a possibility. And that process does give joy, it gives fulfillment, it gives a sense of achievement, as I said before. And it's a wonderful feeling. And as I say, it's the first major step towards achieving oneness. But to gain oneness, you must experience both sides of the coin. You must experience both creation and achievement, but also failure and hardship, creation and destruction. And of course this, as I say, is really what it means to be a pagan, understanding, and I truly understand now actually, my mentor, before I believed that as individuals who have been created in the image of the Asgardians, who have been created in the Innengard, it was our responsibility to create as much as possible, to be involved in creation as much as possible. And a part of me still believes that that is a virtue, you know, that is what the virtuous would do. However, having too much creation over destruction actually hampers one's learning, because simply you must let go at one point of the things that you've achieved, or let go of things that have been created in your life. Things go, things degrade, people leave, you know, things like this, and really, you know, and memories fade, okay? And really the letting go process is what really allows you to progress further. It allows you to not remain within a stasis that is represented with the rune Isa, as we'll see later on. And so I understand now what my mentor was saying about having a balance between creation and destruction. It's very important, because both creation and destruction lead to a complete understanding of oneself. And then when you have a complete understanding of oneself, you can then move into the third aett, where you will find the higher learning centers, as we'll see, and you can start understanding things that are outside of you. Once you understand yourself, you can start to come to try and fully understand, and I mean fully understand and comprehend everything that is around you, and thus gain not a knowledge of oneself, but a simple oneness, a joining of yourself with everything around you. And so there's the first 8 runes, the first aett of the runes of the Elder Futhark script, and my interpretation and description of them, both sort of at a grander scale of the universe itself, but also how they may be represented within us as as qualities. I feel that the most important thing to understand, although it's nice to know how the universe works and that, I've hammered that home before we've even got here, so I've not had to talk about it too much in too much detail, at least anyway. It's given me more time to focus on the self, as well as other aspects, and so as a result, what I'm just going to do now is just surmise what I've just spoken about regards these runes that are represented on a level of self, because this is the important thing, to aid you in your learning processes. Okay, to learn more about yourself, you have to complete the first aett. You have to go through, you have to have all these qualities, join them together, complete the action, so on and so forth, and then feel the joy of achievement. In doing so, you then gain a little bit more knowledge of oneself. Okay, and the first place to start, you remember, of course, is Vehu, which is desire. You must have the desire to seek out knowledge of oneself, to seek out a further progression of yourself and the fulfillment of possibilities. You then need the strength, or the determination, more to the point, to see the seeking out process of desire and to push it forwards to where it needs to go, to aim it and throw it at whatever possibilities are in front of you. Of course, strength and determination is not enough without willpower behind it, fueling that in its own respective way, allowing that strength to smash through any barriers or boundaries that may exist before you, to give you the sense that, well, if you fail at first, try again until you succeed, and eventually you will succeed. If it's doable, you will achieve it. And that is what futhark is all about. Is about willpower, the will to continue no matter how hard whatever you're trying to achieve is. We then have ansuz, which is intention that gives direction. Okay, so you must have an intention behind your actions. When you're trying to complete an action, you must have an intention behind your desire, that strength and that will, because if you don't have intention, there's no direction, and you might just go off and just do random shit. You want to complete a certain specific possibility, a certain achievement, a certain probability, and it's ansuz that gives you that direction through having intention. Okay, then you have rezu. You must have purpose. You must have a reason, essentially, why you're trying to achieve whatever you are trying to achieve. If you have purpose, that really means that you are achieving with that direction not only the right action, but you are achieving the right action at the right time in the right way, so on and so forth. Purpose is very, very important. Without purpose, you can become lost. Okay, you must have a plan of action in your head. However, sometimes, once when you have purpose, as I say, that's enough with the prior energies before it and purpose. That's enough to start fulfilling an action, to start going out there and doing shit, experiencing life, experiencing the world. However, it's so easy to become the jack of all trades yet the master of none, to put your hand into something and but not really see it through. But Gayness, this is the rune that represents perseverance, to continue until completion whatever action or achievement you are going after, to see it through to completion, because without completion you do not gain full knowledge. You do not then gain a full understanding. Then, of course, you have Gabo. Gabo is the merger, and it is the realization of achievement, the epiphany, if you wish, but the sense of realization, sense of achievement that you get through completing and fulfilling an action and a probability. Having success. And it's that sense of achievement that then leads directly then into joy. Joy is, but not joy in because you've completed something, but joy because, and the feeling of joy because it is such a strong emotion, the feeling of joy because through going through those processes, not only have you succeeded and achieved, but you've gained more knowledge of yourself. You've gained knowledge of, at the very least, your potential. You've pushed your potential. You're finding your limits. You're testing those limits. And joy, as I say, comes from the fulfilling of actions, and really just that sense that you get from, as I say, beginning your process towards oneness. Knowing oneself is the first step to oneness. So thanks, guys. It's been been a long video, hence why I split it up. Can you imagine if I did all 3 aets together, especially as the aets tend to get more complicated as we go along, and it would have been at least 3.5 hours, if not 4 hours. So I'll leave it here, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. Comment as you wish. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.